Good everybody, this is Marcel Pursuit, and welcome to another edition of the Sports Inquirer podcast. We're broadcasting on October 21st, 2020. Hope all is well for you out there in the world. We are doing well here in Atlanta, Georgia, just living and grooving and trying to figure things out like everyone else. But as always, if you want to follow everything that we're doing, head to the mothership, thesportsinquirer.net. We've been putting a lot of interviews up on our site. It's very interesting that while the lack of attending games and practices has limited some of our capabilities, it's also increased some other options for us. And that specifically, I say that for video interviews. Instead of having to head all the way to downtown Atlanta, and we live in Ackworth, which is a suburb of Atlanta. It's not too far, but traffic is what it is. So instead of having to head down to all the way down to downtown Atlanta, deal with traffic and a lot of other things, we're able to get a lot more interviews with a lot more people and more conversations with Zoom and other capabilities. I learned to use Skype yesterday. I didn't know about Skype, but I had to use it actually for my job. I had to do a last minute interview on Skype, so I learned how to use that. I'm very intrigued by it because that's another form of communication for me with people. But if you head to our site, you will see a lot of interviews from good sources. We've spoken just in the past 2 weeks. We've spoken with several football players from Georgia State. We've spoken with Georgia State soccer players, men and women, volleyball, Georgia Tech volleyball. We just had a very fun conversation with Michelle Collier, the head coach of the Yellow Jackets. That'll be up later today. We also spoke with Julie Bergman, a player from the Yellow Jackets, about her experiences as a Brazilian coming over to the United States in this fall and dealing with everything going on with the pandemic and having to quarantine and her unique experience. So I highly recommend that you head to our site and check all of that content out. You can also go to our social media platforms, starting with Twitter and Instagram. You can either go to Sports Inquirer, look up Sports Inquirer on those two platforms, and you'll see all of our stuff up there. You can also head to our Facebook pages. We have two of them. You go to either the Sports Inquirer or Sports Inquirer. Either one will provide you everything that you need. And then finally, subscribe to us on our different platforms such as YouTube, SoundCloud, Spotify, and Google Podcast. And if you go to one of our other platforms and you don't see us, make sure you send us a note and check it out. We're doing some maintenance, definitely this weekend or within the next few days, checking some things out, and some updating needs to be done. That's on my end, of course, but sometimes people like different platforms of how to follow us and what we're doing. But if you see something not up to snuff or up to good conditions, send us a note. You can also send us an email, and it's a traditional way of doing it. But we have two emails. We have mpursuit@gmail.com. There's also our other email address, which is sportsinquirer@gmail.com. But there's ways to contact me. Social media is the best way to do that. Just send us a note on Twitter and Instagram, and we'll keep going from there. On today's broadcast, we will discuss the past week in the NFL in the Gridiron Blitz. So we'll recap all that happened there. We'll go into transition into the technical state of Georgia athletics. We'll discuss some things in college sports within the state of Georgia. And I think we're going to conclude the show. I'm going over my notes here. Oh yeah, regional free kick. We're going to discuss Atlanta United. They are fighting for playoff positioning. And so I have some thoughts on what they're trying to do there. Is trying to make the MLS playoffs, which are coming fast upon us. And then finally, I will discuss the World Series matchup. Game 1 took place last night. The Dodgers earned a victory. So I have some thoughts on that and then some residual views from the championship series in the AL and the NL. So make sure you stick around for that. But let's go right to the Gridiron Blitz in the NFL recap portion of our show. We'll start with the Atlanta Falcons. And we'll get to the Cowboys and some of the other teams around the nation and teams that are peaking and maybe looking to make poised to make a good little run, and some teams that are not doing so hot. But we'll start with the Falcons because they had a very active past 2 weeks? Yeah, so the Falcons, I said they've been very busy over the past 14 days, starting with the dismissal of head coach Dan Quinn and general manager Thomas Dimitroff. They had a long tenure with the Falcons, took them to multiple playoff appearances, Super Bowl appearance a few years ago. We all know about that, and them blowing the 28-3 lead, and that's really going to be on the. I don't like saying the was it the not the gravestone or the well I guess you could say that or the way because when people die, what they're on the gravestone, they have what they accomplished or what they did. I don't like that. That's a little morbid, but in the first few lines of their resume or the first two paragraphs of their professional kind of evaluation or review will include losing that Super Bowl to the Patriots. And when after that contest, they did make the playoffs the next season, which was a good thing. But after that, they've had two straight losing seasons, finished 7-9, their past two full seasons together, and then this year they were winless through their first 5 games. When you add all of that up together, it's not a good situation. And you had a lot of apathy within the fan base here in Atlanta. They didn't care too much for the Falcons, a lot of blown leads, and this season was even worse when you're the first team in NFL history to have two consecutive double-digit blown leads in the fourth quarter, the way that the Falcons did. We had the contest at Dallas and losing that game and not recovering the onside kick. And then you have the Chicago contest where you knock out Mitch Trubisky's replaced the quarterback for the Bears. Nick Foles comes in. We know Nick Foles won his championship with the Eagles, but average quarterback at best overall. He comes in and leads them to a victory in a home contest. And I know home is not the same as it used to be with our current conditions, but still, you lose a home contest in that way. That's just not a good situation. And you look at the talent of the team. We saw that on pretty good display this past week at Minnesota. But when you started the season with, and not only injuries and some shufflings takes place, but when you have an entire starting offensive unit of first-round picks, you should be producing more than you are. And then you look at the other side and all of the talent that they've had, the Falcons, it was time to move on. And it happened. And now you saw them with a very good win over Minnesota. And you kind of wonder, was it Quinn that they weren't showing this ever? The contest itself, Matt Ryan, 4 touchdown passes, no interceptions. Julio Jones, he was on the field for the entire contest. He's been banged up for the past, a few years, honestly, but he came in kind of hurt, or in limping, but he had 137 total yards or receiving yards, 2 touchdowns, balanced offense, 40 pass attempts, 37 rushes, forced 3 Kirk Cousins interceptions. Where was all of this during the beginning of the season? It makes you wonder and question what the situation is in Atlanta. Was it an aberration? Was it something that we're not going to see the rest of the year? Or is this maybe a turn for the better for the Falcons? I don't think they're a playoff team. I don't think you can go from the ways they were losing games before to all of a sudden becoming a force or a contender. But maybe you'll see some improvements and they can get a few more wins. And I think that also maybe a factor is everyone is open season for who is going to be on that team. Raheem Morris is the interim head coach. I mentioned him earlier. He's promoted from the defensive coordinator spot. Now, the Falcons' defense has been one of the worst in the league this year. They put up a good effort against Minnesota, but he's fighting for maybe a second chance at a head coach, whether it's the Falcons or some other franchise. You have a lot of guys on that team who need to play well, whether it's for the Falcons in the future or with another franchise. So you add all of that up together, and you have a pretty motivated group in Flowery Branch, where the Falcons practice. So the Falcons got a very good win, and we'll see what happens from there. I saw the Tampa-Green Bay contest. The Bucs emerged with a 38-10 victory. It's very rare you see Aaron Rodgers have 2 consecutive interceptions in 2 straight series, including one of them returned back for a touchdown, and that's exactly what we saw in that contest. I don't know if Tampa is that good or Green Bay is that overrated. I think it may be a little bit of both. But I could definitely see in that contest Green Bay winning the next one. But very good for Tampa. And the thing about Tampa, and it was the first game, I think in NFL history, and I'm pretty sure I'm accurate with this. No turnovers, no penalties. Yeah, so no turnovers includes fumbles, interceptions, all that stuff. So I think it was no turnovers, no penalties, and I think another very good statistic. First time in NFL history, or one of the rare times in history, that you saw that happen. And I mentioned they had the pick six return, forced multiple Aaron Rodgers turnovers, which is very rare. So all of that emerged. Gronkowski, he caught a touchdown pass from Tom Brady. So you saw that combination get going. It took a few weeks, but maybe that'll be a start for that to reemerge for the Bucks. So you add all of that together, and it's a team that can very much contend in the division that doesn't inspire much fear. I know Carolina's been doing well without Christian McCaffrey, and the Saints are still the Saints. You know they're going to probably be a double-digit win contender every single year as long as Breeze and Sean Payton are there. But Tampa can win that division, and if you win a division, you're in the playoffs, and things can work really well for you. So that was a very good win for the Bucks. We'll see what happens there. Tennessee defeated Houston 42-36 in overtime. Very interesting contest. I want to mention that because Tennessee, and it looks like the report is they may be disciplined for their violation of COVID-19 rules and regulations. And they might get a pretty hefty fine, and fines are relative. It's the NFL. Everyone's a billionaire franchise, a $1 billion franchise. So a fine can only do so much. You may see a draft pick down the line. We'll see what happens there. But they were able to win against Buffalo at home on a Tuesday night, quickly turn around and beat Houston in overtime on a Sunday. Now, granted, it was a home contest, but you have to respect that they're able to play on a very short week and have a victory. Derrick Henry, 212 rushing yards, 4 TDs, had a 90-yard run in that contest for a touchdown and the game-winning TD. And so very impressive for him. Ryan Tannehill, 4 touchdown passes. Is he an MVP candidate? He actually might be. I think Derrick Henry is more the MVP, more valuable guy on that roster than Tannehill is, but he has had a very good start to the season for the Titans. The Colts came back from a 21-point deficit to earn a victory over Cincinnati. Phillip Rivers, 3 touchdown passes. Pretty solid win for them overall. I'm very concerned what I'm seeing in Philadelphia. Only one went on the season and fell to the Ravens 30-28. Now you can say Philadelphia had a comeback effort. 2-point conversion fell short in the last minute of regulation. I don't know what that play call was about. If you didn't see it, they tried a QB keep option, or I don't know what that was, but it ended up being Carson Wentz, quarterback for Philly, keeping the ball and trying to run it in on the left side. The Ravens sniffed it out, had a lot of defenders there, and it was just a very conservative play call with limited options. We were going for a 2-point conversion to tie the contest. But as a Philadelphia, and not a lot of weapons. Wentz is not playing very well. Defensively up and down. Crazy part is, and we saw the Cowboys get dismantled at home by Arizona. That division is awful right now. I really think 7 wins may win that division. Look at all things considered. Philadelphia, inconsistencies. Dak Prescott being out for the Cowboys. Very bad effort at home against Arizona. And not all Andy Dalton's fault, but Dalton's very limited, and if the other guys don't step up, you're not going to see much from Dallas. Giants are a mess. Washington's once again, they've been in rebuild mode for the 20th straight year. Actually, no, they had some moments with RG3, Robert Griffin III, so it hasn't been complete rebuild time, but you get what I'm saying. That division is a complete mess right now. So Philadelphia, they're not out of it, nor is Dallas for that matter. But that's really more by default than anything. And so we'll see what happens there in that division. Pittsburgh, completely dominant victory over the Browns, 38-7. Pittsburgh's still rolling undefeated. They look like a major contender for a championship. I think you're probably going to have Kansas City still the best team. I think in the AFC. Baltimore's intriguing because just Lamar Jackson, he's a dynamic quarterback. Their problem with the Ravens, I don't say necessarily a problem, but if they're not running the ball and they're not controlling the pace of the game, I know Lamar Jackson is a very good passer, a very good thrower, underrated thrower, especially when people are saying him coming into the league. But if they're not running the ball and controlling the pace of the contest, they have major issues. And you saw that last season in the playoffs against Tennessee when the Titans were able to run the ball, control the clock. There's not much comeback capabilities. The Ravens are very good front runners in that regard. If they have a lead and they're playing well, they're very tough to beat. But if they fall behind, which happens, that's not a good situation for them. Pittsburgh is very interesting. You're starting to see them emerge as far as defensively. They're playing very well. Now they lost Devin Bush for the season, torn ACL, the linebacker for the Steelers. That's a very big loss for them. They're going to miss him quite a bit. But Pittsburgh's defense, obviously only giving up 7 points to Cleveland. That's a very good stat for them. And offensively, you're starting to see Roethlisberger. He looks pretty healthy. If he can hold up for a full season, which you have to question at this stage of his career, because he's been injured before, but now he's in advanced age in quarterback years, not life years. But if he can stay upright for an entire season, Pittsburgh's intriguing. Baltimore, the Browns. I think this is what you're going to see from that franchise under. So I'm not saying under Sam Bradford, goodness, under Baker Mayfield. He's a very good player. Well, I say he's a good player. And when the team's rolling well, he could be a very good player. But he's just inconsistent. And it's very interesting they benched him for Case Keenum in that contest. I know Stefanski, the head coach, was saying that he took Mayfield out of the game because he didn't want him to get hurt and take any more hits. That's insulting to any athlete, especially a quarterback. I think most quarterbacks prefer to stay in the game, take their hits, take their lumps, and work through it instead of being benched or being taken out for their own safety or their own health. That's not very good. I think Keenum is a very live entity as far as starting for the Browns later on this season. This is a make or break year for Mayfield. If you look at the contract, they haven't picked up his option as far as next season goes. They can walk away from him, and I know he's the number one overall pick, and you look at salary cap, and that's a lot, but it's not like the days of the Sam Bradford. Now Sam Bradford doesn't fit into the conversation. The days of taking Sam Bradford and number one overall picks at quarterback and committing so much money and it being an albatross if you release them with the rookie salary cap scale that's been in the league for a few years now. Releasing a quarterback is not the worst thing in the world. We're going to see that with the Jets and with Sam Darnold. If they get the number one overall pick in the Trevor Lawrence scenario, which is already gaining some steam out there, if the Jets decide to trade or release Sam Darnold for whatever reason, it's not going to be it's not good, but it's not the worst thing for your salary situation. I say all of that, say that Mayfield is not guaranteed to be on the Browns beyond this season. The cutting him or releasing him or whatever term you want to say would not be impossible. So it's a make or break year for him, and this past week was not a good scenario for him. So keep an eye out for him in Cleveland. Just wrapping up some other NFL thoughts. Chicago earned a win over Carolina, 23-16. The Bears may be the best team in the NFC North. I wouldn't have said that at the beginning of the year. I honestly had the Bears finishing last in the NFC North behind Green Bay, Detroit, and Minnesota. But they're in first place right now. Only one loss on the season. You have to give respect to the Bears. Nick Foles, once again, has found his way into a starting lineup, and he's producing wins. So you have to respect that. And then finally, Miami defeated the Jets 24-0. Tua looks like he's going to start this upcoming week. Very good move. Fitzpatrick did his job. He's been a good mentor for Tua. Tua looks like he's worked his way into full health. I knew he wouldn't start the season for two reasons. For the three reasons, honestly, for the Dolphins. One, Ryan Fitzpatrick is a competent quarterback, so you have had him there, and he led him to some good wins last season. So that was number one. Two was hip injury. We all saw it. That's something you just don't bounce back from. You knew it was going to take him some time, and we're in October right now, a little less than a full calendar year. That sounds about right for hip surgery and the procedure that he went through to about 10 months of recovery. That seemed appropriate as far as him being full strength and ready to go. And then three, and this is what makes guys like Joe Burrow, what he's doing in Cincinnati. I know they lost the contest to the Colts this past week, but rookie quarterbacks, very impressive that they're able to come in and do well under these circumstances. Minimal off season, all the COVID regulations. You don't have as much interaction with your teammates as you normally would. You pretty much were dropped into fall camp or training camp, ready to play, no preseason contest. A very tough adjustment for all rookies, but especially the quarterbacks. I think Tua will need a few weeks to get training, get some practice, get used to the rhythm and flow of everything, and now it's his time to shine for the Dolphins. So I condone that move completely. Let's transition over to the technical state of Georgia athletics and discuss some college football. Georgia State really took a bad loss against Arkansas State this past week, 59-52 at the Arkansas State. Teams combined for 111 points and 1,192 yards of offense, but the Red Wolves got a late touchdown to secure the victory. Cornelius Brown IV, or Quad as he's called by the Panthers, very good performance by the redshirt freshman quarterback for Georgia State. 314 total, passed 314 yards, 3 TDs. Sam Pinkney caught all 3 of those touchdown passes. Quad also had 83 rushing yards and 2 rushing TDs, so he had 5 total touchdowns in the contest. So that tied the Georgia State record. Pinkney had a career high 146 receiving yards, and his 3 touchdown catches is one shy of the school record. So they had a lot of offense going, but defensively, just not a good situation for the team. And Georgia State, and we're going to try to find out by the time we do our preview show of the upcoming contest, because they do go to Troy this upcoming Saturday. They were without for the Arkansas State game. The Panthers were without Dustin Coates, their leading rusher in the Sun Belt Conference, along with Cornelius McCoy, their top receiver. I don't know why they were out. We're not getting word, but with the way things are, if they're not, I'll put it this way, if a player, especially on the college level, because there's a little more security, pros, if you're out with I'll say non-injury related issues, they're not like off the field stuff. Look, if someone may have, I don't want to put COVID on somebody, but if a player isn't available and is not of the traditional injury form, you can make some speculation of what's going on. I'm gonna try to find out this week what the true word is, but McCoy and Coates not being available was a very tough situation for the Panthers, but they still put up a lot of points, so you can't really question that. Tucker Gregg, he had a breakout game, 142 rushing yards for Georgia State in the contest, replacing Coates. So the Panthers were able to score quite a bit, but defensively it just wasn't there for them. Here is head coach Sean Elliott discussing the defeat.
It's a disappointing night, to tell you the truth. I mean, what was the score, 59-52? I mean, just the way it played out. Couldn't stop them defensively. We were short of defensive coach tonight, our defensive coordinator, and certainly that made things a little bit difficult all week. And then, as it's probably evident in the game there tonight, when you give up 59 points. We had our opportunities to win. Once again, another special teams blunder right there at the first, drop a punt. something we talked about, something, we stressed. It certainly can't happen. All in all, I think the effort's there. I mean, you go out and you play your hardest. Thursday night contest against a good Arkansas State team, and we came up short. We dealing with situations we have no control over, where you deal with this COVID, and you have to roll with the punches. And like I said, we were short tonight, a few players and a coach, and came on the short end of it. So we'll regroup, keep our heads up, move on, get ready for Troy, and try to become a better football team.
And that was head coach Sean Elliott for Georgia State discussing the loss. And they face Troy this upcoming week, so they get right back in the Sun Belt play, trying to come out with a victory. Rough down the flats for Georgia Tech. They lost to Clemson 73-7. That's not I would say a typo if I was doing my typing or my writing, but that's not an audio mistake. They fell 73-7. The Yellow Jackets scored their lone touchdown of the contest. Jeff Sims completed a TD pass to the Jalen Camp in the first quarter. The score was actually tied 7-7, but then the Tigers went on a pretty big run there, and they held the Yellow Jackets scoreless the rest of the game. Trevor Lawrence, just dominant performance. 404 passing yards, 5 touchdowns. Played a half and a few series in the third quarter. I mean, we just mentioned the Jets. They're in the front line to have the number 1 overall pick. That's probably going to stay that way, and it's going to be very tough to turn down Trevor Lawrence. We've discussed this before. Clemson's pretty much like Georgia Junior, or I was joking. I was on one of my other podcasts that I was doing for work. I was saying that Clemson playing in Atlanta is like a de facto home game. You just look at the fan base of Clemson. A lot of Clemson fans. It's a border. South Carolina and Georgia, they share a border, so obviously there's a lot of crossover. But you look at the roster of Clemson, a lot of Georgia players, including Trevor Lawrence, who played at Cartersville, which is literally 15 miles from where we recorded this show. So you add all of that together, it was like a homecoming for the Tigers. What I'm trying to say through it all. But here is head coach Jeff Collins for Georgia Tech discussing the loss.
Hats off to Clemson. They're number 1 team in the country for a reason. They're really good players, really good coaches. So just a lot of respect for that program, that team. The margin of error when you're playing a team of that caliber is razor thin. And I don't think we closed the margin as much as I had hoped. We had showed really strong glimpses of what we can be 8 nights ago against Louisville Friday night with a big conference win. And I anticipated we prepared really, really well this week going into this game with the margin of error when we have turnovers at inopportune times, and they're able to capitalize on it. You cannot do that against great football teams. So that just hats off to them. And obviously we've got to get a lot better. Got to make the corrections from this game, put them to bed, because in 7 days we've got another ACC match on the road that we've got to get ready for. Loaded up to stop the run, and I thought we did that at times, but in doing that, there were some times that we were overcommitting and had some really explosive plays, and that the quarterback is really good, and so just got some things to clean up, and we will. The mood in the locker room was appropriate, and there's a lot of things that we got to get better at, and we will.
And that was Jeff Collins discussing the defeat. Obviously, Georgia Tech is in second year under Collins and trying to rebuild and trying to develop the program. 73-7 is a very tough loss to take. There's not really many positives you can push from that. You just have to look at a team that's rolling right now. Clemson's probably the best team in college football, and they caught the Yellow Jackets at a very tough time for them. So there's really not much to preview beyond that. We'll discuss Georgia Tech on a future show. Georgia, not a good week for Georgia college athletics on the football field. The Bulldogs fell to Alabama 41-14. The stat I look at the most, 40 passing attempts by Georgia. I don't care who you're playing. Unless Georgia's playing an inferior school, then Alabama's definitely not that. Them passing 40 times is not in their style of play, what they want to do. But they had to throw it 40 times. Just look at the quarterback situation. Is Stetson the answer? Probably not. I mean, the story is very good with Bennett. Walk on, came back to the program, worked his way into starting lineup. But that's really not where Georgia wants to be as far as being an elite program in a championship level. And you just look at the rosters. You look at Mac Jones, Alabama, the quarterback. You look at those receivers, Waddle leading them. Probably the best receiving group in all of college football. You have Harris at a running back. You add all of that up together. Alabama just has more talent than Georgia. And you knew they got a nice little boost with Nick Saban returning to coach that contest. I personally wish Nick Saban did not coach in that game. Like, I know he's tough. He's one of the greatest coaches of all time, maybe the greatest. So we get all of that. But the man literally had COVID. He's a senior citizen, and I'll say it for anybody, not just him. It could be a grad assistant, a guy in his 20s, and you just had COVID. I know you failed. I mean, you passed the test, I guess 3 straight days before the game. Still, man, you're just recovering from COVID, and you're on the sideline, and all of that stuff. And it wasn't like he was in the booth or anything like, or social distancing himself from the players or from his fellow coaches and everything like that. He was right on the sideline a day or two after passing, or a day after having it. I thought that was, I won't say reckless, but it was just, I did not like that look at all. And just for his sake, I think he should have fell back. He should have done the game from home or be in the booth and isolated himself in some way. But these college coaches, man, it's not just, well, I don't get political, but you look at the approach our current president has with COVID, and it's not surprising to see that a lot of other people are taking that approach to COVID-19. But it is what it is. That was my political rant of the day. But as far as getting back onto the field, and with Georgia, they're going to probably win the rest of their games. They still have a chance to be in a good position. They can't lose another contest, obviously, if they have national championship aspirations, which they do. And so they're just going to have to win out and maybe get Alabama back in the SEC championship game. If they win that contest, they can find themselves in the playoffs. And that's going to and just overall, I look at the playoff picture for college football. The Big Ten finally starts playing games this upcoming weekend. And yes, we know they were not going to play. They weren't playing as many games as some other conferences, and we all know the reasons why. But the point is, with them, let's say Ohio State, because that's going to be the best team in that conference. If they go undefeated, they're probably going to be in the playoffs because it's Ohio State and they're a marquee franchise or a program. People like them. They like to see the name is recognizable. But they're only going to play about 7-8 games, I think, tops, where some of these other teams are going to play up to their full double-digit contest, 10, 11, 12 games. So if Ohio State does not win all of their games, they fall to somebody, which can happen. If there's not an undefeated Big Ten team, not named Ohio State, we'll say Purdue. I'll throw some love to the Boilermakers. If Purdue goes undefeated, it's the Big Ten. They still may be in the playoffs, but we'll see about that. The Pac-12, maybe if USC or Oregon goes undefeated, maybe they get a shot at it. But I look at the playoff picture right now, the way it's set up. You got to figure the ACC champion, which will probably be Clemson. I know Notre Dame's in there, North Carolina. Those teams have, North Carolina just lost to Florida State, but we'll see. I mean, Notre Dame's intriguing. It's Notre Dame. So you got to assume Notre Dame or Clemson will probably find their way into the playoffs, whoever wins the ACC. And if either one loses one game, they can still find a way in there. But we'll say, for the sake of our conversation, the ACC has one team. You got to assume the SEC team gets there. We'll say Alabama. Say they win out. They're in there. And that's two teams. Or if Georgia wins, we'll say the SEC champion, whoever it is. That's two squads. I don't think a Big 10, a Big 12 team is going to be in there. We've seen Oklahoma and Texas have their struggles. I don't know about that, about a team getting in there. Point is, of all of this, I know there's some other undefeated teams out there. No, BYU's still lurking as an outsider, trying to find their way into it. Even though BYU's an independent. But I look at it this way. It would not surprise, we've seen it before, and under normal circumstances, multiple SEC teams in the playoffs as far as the top four teams. It very much can happen. So Georgia, you look at all of that. If they win out, especially if they get a win over an Alabama or another team in the SEC West, whoever wins that, it's probably gonna be Alabama. So they win all of their games, including the SEC championship game. They'll find their way into the playoffs. And once you're in the playoffs, anything can happen. So there's hope is not lost for the Bulldogs. But if they're going to make a run, they're probably going to find some more dynamic entities in their offensive set. So they have to figure that out. Looking around the rest of the college sports landscape in the state of Georgia, the Yellow Jackets volleyball team had a very good weekend, defeating Wake Forest in 2 contests. We have very good interviews with Michelle Collier, the head coach of the Georgia Tech, as well as player Julia Bergman. So make sure you head to the site to check that out. The Georgia State men's soccer team is also in first place in the Sun Belt Conference. We had a very good interview with Brett Cernsey and player Andrew Bennett on the site. So make sure you go there and listen to those. We spoke with them and their quest to they lost in the Sun Belt Conference Championship game last year, so they're trying to find some redemption and find a way into the NCAA tournament. So make sure you go to our site and check those interviews out. We also spoke with Sally Bohemus, the head coach of Georgia State Volleyball, and they're trying to find their way through the Sun Belt schedule and make things happen for them. So on the site, go to that interview, as well as Leah Wilcox, a senior on the team. We spoke with her about them trying to once again get some wins and turn things around in the program. So make sure you go to those interviews on our site. Just do a quick search and you'll see all of that going on. The original free kick portion of our broadcast with Atlanta United trying to find their way into the playoffs. They fell 1-0 at Toronto, or when I say at Toronto, at Connecticut. And also for the Canadian teams, they are not able to play in Canada right now because of the rules and regulations with COVID-19. So the Canadian teams have found a home in the United States for travel purposes. So the game was in Connecticut, and Atlanta was in the contest most of the way. Stephen Glass, the manager, made some good substitutions, bringing in designated players Ezekiel Barco and Marcelo Moreno in the second half. You saw a little more dynamic activity from Atlanta, especially on the offensive end. But in the end, the Toronto team was able to score the game winner in the 89th minute. Pablo Piatti was able to redirect the ball with the header in the 89th minute off of a crossing pass from Larea. And that was the game winner for the Toronto squad. So Atlanta is right now an outside looking in of the playoffs. They're not in the playoff spot right now. Remember, the top 10 teams in the Eastern Conference make the postseason. Atlanta is not in that spot. But here's Stephen Glass discussing the defeat earlier this week.
Massively, because I think the performance level of the players and the work rate, they deserved a lot more out of the game. I think everybody can see the performance level they put in tonight was incredible against one of the top teams in the Eastern Conference and probably one of the top teams in the country. So the guys can be happy with that. Obviously, we're very disappointed not to get 1 or 3 points, but I think if we continue that performance level in the games that we have left, hopefully we'll be well situated come playoff time. I don't know if you ever expect a result when you're playing a team like Toronto. The result we were hoping for was a win. I think it'd be fair to say we were in control of the game. I think we had the bulk of the possession. It felt like we felt like we controlled their dangerous players in the positions that we wanted them to be in. We planned on negating the ball going into Pozuelo, into Piatti, and behind our midfield line. I think we did it very well. I think Remedy and Mo Adams were fantastic in the middle of the pitch. The centre halves were great. Fullbacks were good in the main. We were going for a win. So that's what we're always going to do. Obviously, we would have liked a point, and I think we fully deserved one.
And now Stephen Glass discussing the loss to Toronto and just a disappointment in giving up that late goal. As you mentioned, they look like they're playing well, especially in that second half, and giving a good effort. They just were unable to get that goal, and Toronto was. So that really messed things up. And the Five Stripes are going to host DC United this upcoming Saturday. We will have a full preview of that contest on our next show, so make sure you stick around for that. And then finally, miscellaneous department, the World Series started yesterday. The Dodgers were able to earn a victory in Game 1 over Tampa. I think that it's an interesting series in a way. You have the Dodgers, who we know have not won a World Series since 1988. They've had multiple World Series appearances since then, including several over the past few years. We know they lost over the past 5 years. They lost to the Red Sox, and they've lost to the Astros in the World Series. So we've seen them in this spot before, trying to get that championship. So I think there's intrigue there. Clayton Kershaw had a very strong performance in Game 1 last night, as we're recording this show. We know his postseason woes. He really showed up in a big way for the Dodgers last night. And then on the other side, you have Tampa, a team that, I don't want to say they're no names. Unless you're really inside baseball, it's very tough to name a lot of players on that team. The Dodgers know about Kershaw, Mookie Betts, Corey Bellinger, defending MVP for the team or for the National League. They have a lot of names. Walker Buehler, I know he's a Vanderbilt Commodore like me, so I know about him quite a bit, but still he's become one of the major young star pitchers in all of baseball. So they have a lot of name value on the Dodgers, and they should have the highest payroll in baseball. Tampa has one of the lowest payrolls, and when you have that, obviously it's a lot of guys that you're not too familiar with. So it's an interesting dynamic in this series of what they're going to do. Tampa's not out of it by any means. Their bullpen is tremendous. We know they throw a lot of arms at you, and when you can do that, you'll find a way to beat in a lot of contests. But the Dodgers really imposed their will, but showed their strengths. Good pitching. Mookie Betts. And I saw this stat while we were preparing the show. First man since Babe Ruth to have a walk and 2 stolen bases in a World Series contest. And when you go back to Babe Ruth and do something in the World Series, that's obviously very good. So you add all of that together, I think the Dodgers are in a very good position to make a good run to win a championship. So we'll be following that series throughout as it takes place. And I guess I'll mention the Braves as well. A very good year for Atlanta. When you look at you're in a mixed situation. You're disappointed to lose in the championship series to the Dodgers, especially when you're up 3-1. When you're up 3-1, you got to win that series. So you definitely want that. So there's disappointment with the fan base, which is understandable. But I think when you look back on it, you take a step back. It's a very good future for Atlanta, and it's very tough in pro sports or any sport to say, "Oh, the future is bright," and because you don't know what's going to happen. Injuries, trades, free agency. There's so many factors that the roster that you see now on your team is not going to be the same the next season, and Atlanta's going to deal with that quite a bit because I don't think you're going to see Osuna back on the squad. I think he's played his way into a pretty good contract with another team. We saw that last year with Josh Donaldson. He's with Minnesota now. He got signed a big deal with them. I think Osuna's going to be the same way. I think Nick Markakis has probably played his last game for the Braves, especially with Pache now he's going to be the starting outfielder, one of the starting outfielders for the Braves. So you add all that up, so they're going to lose those guys. but you bring back quite a bit. Osuna's going to be back. Freddie Freeman. Those guys should be perennial MVP candidates. You look at the starting rotation with if Soroka comes back from his Achilles injury, starting three of Freed, Ian Anderson, and Soroka. That's pretty solid top three pitchers in your rotation. All young guys, all under control, contract with the team for a pretty good salary. You add all that together, those are good signs. Dansby Swanson, you have to sign him to a pretty good deal. He's played his way into a solid contract, but you can work around that. I think you add all that together, they're going to be a very good team. Going to work the back end of their bullpen. But bullpens change every year, so that's not the worst thing in the world. But you add all that together, the Braves should be a major contender for the next year or two, if all things work out. So that's a good thing. You can look at that. But it's still disappointing that when you're up 3-1, you still have to find a way to win that series, and they were unable to do that. But we'll evaluate the Braves for the upcoming year when they get back to playing. And that concludes today's show. Thanks for listening to our broadcast. As always, follow us on the sportsinquirer.net and just search our social media platforms on Twitter and Instagram under Sports Inquirer. You search that, you'll find us, and you can see everything that we're doing. Until next time, good fight, good night, be safe.